Hello, everyone. I tried a soft ramp up here of the voice this time. See whether that is still scary. It probably is. But this time, maybe you can hear me. And last time I rickrolled the entire audience, and I think as a result ended up with YouTube banning part of the audio from my video. So I figured I won't do that again. How's the how's the volume? Yeah, I never know whether to say like good evening or good morning or what is the most appropriate thing because like there's people watching this from basically all over the world, and so there's like no matter what I say, it'll be wrong for someone. Volume is good, a little quiet. Howdy. Yeah, no video yet. The video will come. We will slowly but surely together do the pre-stream check to make sure everything is set up correctly. I love how half the people are like a little louder and some people are loud and clear. Are you sure your volume is not just low? Amazing. Let's then see next if I can get you to see my face. That'll be next step here. Let me see if I can turn this down slightly because it's a little bright. Where's my phone? Boom. You should now see my face if I did things correctly. Volume is quite low. Oh no, quite low. It's definitely not quite low. I think you're lying. I'm looking at my like volume meter for the mic right now, and it is definitely not low. I'm like almost peaking the mic. But maybe I can set the out volume differently. Let's see, properties. No. Advanced properties. Yeah, no, I think it's false. I think you're lying. The video quality is not actually upgraded. Well, I mean, I guess it is, but what actually happened was I realized that the output HDMI port on my streaming cam was set to 1080p instead of 4K, even though it's a 4K camera. And so I was like, great, now it's better. Cool. Okay, so you can see me. That is a good sign. It's a little bright, so let's fix that real quick. Isn't it fun to do the pre-flight checklist with me here? Ooh. That's way too white. We don't want that. Let's do this-ish plus that-ish. Now it's starting to get cozy. Beautiful. That's more like it. 80 to 90% of what I'd consider the sweet spot. Perfect. I'll take it. Cool. All right, so that works. Now let's see if I can share my screen as well. Boom. You should now see the screen. In theory, you should still see me up in the corner. You should see a GitHub repository called Squaba on the screen, if I've done my homework correctly. No, that's actual lights that are remote controlled. So there's one actually. Haha! I'll show you a secret. So one of the things that I have set up since last time is a handhold cam. I can't see what you can see, but this is the setup behind my screen. As you can see, there's an Elgato key light back there that I can adjust the temperature of and the brightness of. So back to the screen. Screen contrast is very low. Interesting. Text is hard to read on the repo. All right, let's go back to OBS and see what OBS... Ooh, that does look pretty dark. Why does that look so dark? Is there... Transform? Edit transform. No. Why has it decided to be dark now? Blending method. There's no blending set up on it. That's fun. Filters. There are no filters on it either. Why is it decided to make my screen this dark? Let's try properties. Select monitor. This monitor. What? why is it darkening the image? This is new and I don't like it. Cool. It's not clear how I add a filter that reverses this because I guess I could add a color correction thing that turns back up the brightness, but that's not, I don't think it's just a brightness thing. But I suppose we can try. No, I mean, it shouldn't darken the screen. There's no color correction directly in OBS, right? How about... But I don't understand why it's changed. That's the fascinating part. I don't think there's a hue shift to it. How does that now look? Nothing has changed on my end, so that's fascinating. That's worse and terrible. Cool. Okay, great. That's good to hear. Fine, defaults. Yes. Not readable at all. But like, okay, so how bad is this actually? Like if I go to this, for example, which is much brighter. Because it looks normal on my screen. So this seems like it's the capture thing that's changed. Okay, this is fine. All right, let's pull up a terminal here and open some code. How does this look? This looks okay? Okay, this is fine. So as long as you can see the code. I love how some people are like too dark and some people go like, that looks great. Terminal is very, very dull. A bit dark but readable. Slightly bad. Interesting. Okay, so there's something wrong with the contrast here. Best I can think of is that the color mode of the output video is wrong somehow. Output. Let's see if there's anything we can do about that. Not reasonably. And I can't change... The only thing I can think of is that it has decided to upgrade to 10-bit color or something, and it's confused about it. But why is the contrast so high? There's literally nothing on here that should make the contrast high. Set color, no. Scale filtering. It looks like it's using some kind of... Oh, let's try this. Did that do anything? No, that made no difference. Why is it decided? So this is why you should never upgrade your software. Yeah, but the worry I have is that the recording is going to be the same. Here's what I'm going to try. I'm going to try to record for a second. And then stop recording. And then over here, play. What is today? 0801 at 1735. And let's see how that looks. Yeah, so that looks super dark to me as well. So that means the recording has the same problem, which is highly unfortunate. Vibe fixing the problem. Yeah, I know, right? But this, what? This has to be something new in the way, because the camera looks fine. So it's got to be the Wayland capture. So it's not OBS. No, this is not OBS because the camera looks fine, right? If I do this, right, like this I think looks normal. So it's specifically the Wayland screen share. So the question is, why is the OBS Wayland screen share confused? Now let's see if we can solve this problem together. Wayland Sway HDR OBS. No, that seems unlikely. Oh. No. Contrast. April 2025. No, that seems wrong. Let's do OBS, Sway, Wayland, Too Dark, Contrast. See what we get. But it's confusing why this has changed. Right? Like, this is the exact same setup I've been using for a while. That's 5 years old. That's not right. That's also old. That seems unlikely to be the problem. This would be about the screen. No, I don't have any flux running or anything like that. Interesting. So the reason why I think vibing won't work here, we can try it. But the reason why I don't think it will work here is because I suspect this is related to a new release of either Sway or OBS. But we'll try. I'm running OBS on Arch Linux, and my Wayland screen capture is suddenly much darker and higher contrast than it usually is. What do you think may have caused, I can't spell, this change of behavior? Oops. Caused this change in behavior. But I can't turn off HDR in my Windows settings given that I'm on Linux. Yeah, that seems unlikely. That also seems unlikely. Setting is advanced video. No, that would be for the output, which is not what's wrong. Can't change that. Color profile for my monitor should not make a difference. That's not going to be useful. I mean, I update my system all the time, so that could totally be. But let's do OBS Wayland Gamma. Wayland capture. Well, all right. Kagi doesn't always give me the most helpful results here. But why has this changed? And why does no one else have the same problem? This is fascinating stuff. Fun times. See, I don't want to do this stream with broken video where people can't read my screen. I suspect a reboot will not make a difference here. Let me see if... Yeah, this only... So this, what does OBS use to capture? It's like it's this thing, right? Gamma. That, okay, that doesn't exist anymore. That's fun. Okay, I don't think it's gamma because that doesn't seem to be a thing. Screen share is broken when HDR is enabled. Okay, great. Sway, turn off 10-bit. I can't spell of. How to check is 10-bit colors are enabled. I don't think that works. Yeah, that doesn't work. That's also 3 years old. See, I'm pretty sure. Sway config. That I'm not configuring that. So it could be that the sway default has changed. In settings, there's an advanced tab that has color settings. Oh yeah. No, but it's not the color of the output though. It's the color of the gathered input. And this is producing 8-bit color. Unless it's trying to downsample from HDR to SDR, but it seems unlikely. Okay, let me try to stop the stream, change this setting, and start it again. All right, I'll see you in a second. I'm going to claim that that made no difference. It really does look like HDR to SDR being wrong, right? But why would it think it's getting... This sounds like Sway just is now outputting HDR. But I don't think I've done anything to change that. Okay, fine. Sway release log. What changed in 1.11? Alpha modifier for a surface. Improved screen capture. Oh no. Oh no. Well, this is interesting. So that does mean the downgrading my sway might help. That's interesting. So let's go to the issue tracker here and go look for HDR. Nothing there. Yeah, I'm pretty sure. This is the... All right, so here's what we'll do. I will, again, stop the stream, and then I will restart it after I've downgraded Sway. Now let's see if that does the trick. Oh, man. Okay. All right, see you in a second. All right, we try again. How about now? How does this seem? I don't think that changed anything. Let's see what people think in chat here. Why am I getting top chat? That's not what I want. All chat, please. Thank you. You think OBS is doing the downsampling? Yeah, it does feel the same. I think it is still OBS. Yeah, this looks... So, does OBS... Okay, let's try without this. I don't think that changed anything, right? So it's not the camera. So it is specifically the capture. But I'm now running an older version of Sway. So what else could have changed? GitHub Sway. See what else we have in the changelog here. I already tried removing it and adding it back in, and it didn't seem to make a difference. What else do we have? 10-1. From when? January. No, I've done streams since January and did not have this problem. Okay. What else could this be? So it could be the XDG desktop portal WLR. Yeah. Let's see if the Arch Wiki has anything useful here. Does this have anything with HDR or 10-bit? Don't see anything HDR. From 2023. Okay, what if I explicitly tell Sway to give me this? Does that change anything? No. That did not change anything. Okay. Yeah, OBS thinks that this is HDR input and it's just not. That I agree. That is what this looks like. But why does OBS think that it's HDR? I guess I can downgrade my OBS too. All right, fine. I'll downgrade my OBS and then we will see here. So sudo downgrade OBS Studio. No, I can't spell. Studio. What do we got down here? Let's go to 3104 maybe. I did reload Sway. There's a hotkey for reloading it. Cool. Then I will stop streaming and then I'll be back to you with a lower version of OBS Studio in a second. Well, how do we feel about that? Cool. That, I mean, now it looks fine. All right, so OBS is not our friend today. Cool. Let's try to see if we can figure out. This was just a downgrade from. Oh, let's see if 31 point. There's a hotfix for 31.1. Freeze. None of this seems different. Okay, so none of these feel like they're different. So let's see what happened here. What changed in 31.1? Oh, do you think it's this one? Do you think maybe it's that one? Oh, you think it's the... Wait, where was the... What? Am I blind? Gamma shift. Oh, yeah. Cool. Okay. Yeah, no, you're totally right. So let's then see if I search for OBS Studio. Yeah, there's still only 31.1. So let's go to Arch and see where Arch is at with OBS Studio. Whoa, why did it go there? Packages. I want OBS Studio. OBS Studio is marked as out of date. How do I... View changes. All right, so they just haven't done the bump yet. Great, that's fine. All right, we fixed it by downgrading OBS. All right, I'm fine. Everything is fine. Let's go back to our previously scheduled programming. Well, you all got a peek behind the screen of what it's like to try to do streaming in 2025. All right. Oh, Okay, let's try to do the thing we actually came here to do. Let me do this. And cd squaba, just to get my setup back in order here. Cool. Okay. Well, thank you all for doing the pre-stream check. That's all now done. Now we can go to do the actual point of the stream. So, so let's now turn on recording, and then we can do this for real. Oh, let me drink some water first before we start. Okay, I have seagulls outside my window. They're deciding to be loud, but such is life. Okay, let's start recording. Hi everyone, welcome back to another Rust stream. This time we're going to tackle something new. We're still going to be doing Rust, but we're going to try to do vibe coding. Now, the caveat to this is I have never done vibe coding before. I've watched some other people do it. I have installed claude-code and I've set it up with a particular repository. And part of this is because I'm sort of a Luddite when it comes to like a lot of the current AI, let's call it hype, whether it's deserved or not. In particular, I have this deep-seated fear is the wrong word, but perception that these machine learning models don't really understand what they're doing, that they are something that they're really good at. They are really good at pattern recognition, pattern replication, merging patterns, and being able to reproduce things that seem like they coherently make sense, as in they look reasonable, without necessarily understanding the constructs that happen behind the scenes. What that means is, I think, you know, if I were to try to guess the kinds of things that it's good at, it would be things like, you know, writing a WordPress template, or writing yet another command line application, or talking to the AWS SDK or multiple AWS SDKs to sort of fiddle bits between them, writing bots against well-known APIs, things where there are lots of good examples that exist online that they can sort of patch together enough to construct a reasonable application. And those can get decently complicated. It's not that I think they can't make complicated things. It's that I suspect that where they struggle is in reasoning about things like what are the borrow checking rules in Rust, or things like advanced type system properties, like things like, is this change backwards compatible? Things that actually require that you understand the underlying principles, not just that you can regurgitate sounds too strict, but where you can only replicate things you've seen lots of examples of before. But of course, this has been an opinion I've held. That does not mean that it's true. And so what I want to do is basically put vibe coding through some tests, basically to gather evidence for myself. And really, this is like the scientific approach of try to prove yourself wrong, right? So I have a list of 4 different changes that I want to make to this particular library. I'll explain what the library is in a second. And so I'm going to try to make as many of those 4 changes as I can over the course of the next, you know, however many hours it takes. And I just want to see how well the agentic AI does at this. Like, is it able to do the things that I don't think it can do, or that I think it will struggle with, to better calibrate my head for what is feasible and what is not. Now, keeping in mind, of course, that this is new to me. I haven't done vibe coding before, so you're going to get my sort of my raw impressions here of how well or not well this works. And that also means that there's a bunch of techniques that I don't know. I'm not completely uneducated here. So I have done some amount of looking at what other people do to prompt agentic AI and everything. So I'm not starting from I don't even know what this is, but I don't I'm going to be lacking a bunch of the sort of skills in the fingers that people who have done this a lot so far, to the extent that you can have done this a lot given how recent the technology is. But so my guess is that over the course of this, there are a bunch of things where I will go, this doesn't seem to work pretty well. And then in chat or after the video, someone else is going to tell me, oh, you just did this thing wrong. If you prompt it this way instead, it'll do way better. So we might end up doing a second stream like this where it's like, John is less new to this and now tries again at the things where he claimed that it was bad. Part of this is also that I want to try to sort of articulate what ends up being hard, like shaping the outlines of the things that they can do well and the things that the agentic AI struggles with. I'm also pretty interested to see what chat has to say here. I'm assuming that in chat we have a decent distribution here of people who have done a bunch of vibe coding before and people who are very skeptical of it like me and everyone in between. And so we're going to try this journey together. Two housekeeping things before we start. So the first is, this is actually the first ever sponsored stream that I've done. It's not that someone told me to do this particular topic. It's not sponsored by like by Anthropic or anything like that. But there is a sponsor for the video who just want me to make more educational content and help me do that. More about the sponsor at the end of the video if you're interested. The second thing is, the crate that we're going to be working on here is semi-arbitrarily chosen. Like I've picked one where I have some to-do things in mind and where I think there's like, the challenges are along the dimensions that I think are hard. So I'm actually going to give a brief presentation on what this library is before we start vibe coding on it. And this is just because I think it'll be necessary context for you all to have to understand why the changes are non-trivial. So this is actually a talk that I gave at the Amsterdam Rust meetup 2 days ago. I'm going to give a shortened version of that here. And feel free to ask questions in chat. I'll try to keep it relatively brief, but it's to give you a sense of the problem that this crate is trying to solve and the way in which it's trying to solve it. Cool. Okay. So are there any questions about the setup for this video before I dive into what Squaba is and why it's called that? Bunch of people who are interested in what this is going to look like. Other people who are similarly skeptical. Other people who are very excited. I will be using claude-code. My impression from the community here is that that is the one that seems to be generally speaking, the best. I've seen things about like Gemini CLI, for example, that's sort of up and coming and can also be cheaper to run, for example. But I wanted to pick what is sort of the best one, even if it's more expensive, for example, to make sure that I don't bias my initial perceptions of this with a subpar tool. Like I don't want to be able to blame the tool for why it did not work very well. Okay, great. So Squaba. So the setup for this is, at work, we have to do a bunch of spatial math. Spatial math is not a technical term, but it's like math about things that are in 3D space. Think like you have a plane flying through the air and you spot something out the window of a plane and you want to describe where that thing is in relation to the plane. This is the kind of thing where you need like 3D coordinates. You might think about GPS coordinates, but if you have a pilot sitting in the pilot seat and says that way, how do they say that way in a meaningful sense? And how do you translate that into something that made sense to someone that's standing on the ground or in GPS coordinates or whatever it might be? This requires transforming between these different coordinate systems. And so you're doing math in spatial, like in 3D space. And so spatial math. All of our code is basically in Rust, and so I wanted to write this in Rust. And in particular, I wanted to make it type safe. So I wanted to make sure that if you create a coordinate, which is really just an XYZ coordinate, right? So it's just 3 floating point numbers. But if you create a coordinate in one coordinate system, like northeast down, for example, which is compass directions. And then you create a different coordinate that's in the coordinate that the pilot uses when looking out of their window, then those 2 coordinates are in different coordinate systems. They are not interchangeable. And so we want at the type level to enforce these to be different. The interesting property of this is that the Squaba library is actually mostly types and not that much implementation. Most of the implementation is really just like an algebra types and quaternions and some multiplications. And then most of it is just trying to pack this into a type representation that makes it safe to use or hard to use it incorrectly. So really, we're trying to answer the question of where is that way when you say that way in 3D space. There are two things you kind of need to solve. One of them is, what is your frame of reference? Like, what is that way in relation to? And the second is, how does my frame of reference relate to your frame of reference? How do the two compare? And how do I go between them? So we're going to go through an exercise here. Where is the balloon? So let's say that a pilot in a plane spots a weather balloon out the window, 30 degrees up from sort of straightforward out their window, and at 2 o'clock to the right from forward, at a distance of about 150 meters. The plane itself is flying north-northeast and climbing at a 10-degree angle. So already you can see that there's like something we need to do to combine these angles, right? Because if the pilot is looking 30 degrees up and the plane is climbing at a 10-degree angle, then clearly it's like a 40-degree to the ground. So already there, something's happening. And the plane itself is located at these particular GPS coordinates, which happen to be above the Viking Museum in Oslo, because why not? It has to be somewhere, right? And the question now becomes, where's the balloon? In theory here, you have enough information that you should be able to compute the GPS coordinates of the balloon. But try, if you will, out of the information that's on the screen here, to compute what that coordinate is. It's really not very easy. And the reason is because there are a bunch of different coordinate systems here. The first one is what's known as FRD, or front, right, down, which is descriptions relative to the body of the plane, like the axes of the plane, which go through the belly of the plane, across the wings, and or along the fuselage, rather, of the plane, across the wings and down through the belly. Then you have NED, which is what we think of as compass directions. So north, east, and down. Those are the three axes of that coordinate system. And then we have WGS84, which is what we commonly know as GPS coordinates. So this is not a Cartesian coordinate system. It doesn't have X, Y, Z. It's just latitude, longitude, and altitude as like a point on the Earth's sphere. So we need some way to relate between these. The first of these is a local coordinate system. It describes coordinates relative to the body axis of some object, like a plane. We have front, right, down, like I just talked about. There's also other coordinate conventions here for the axes, such as front, right, up, which is commonly used in Unity. So here the X, Y, Z axes are front is X, right is Y, and in FRD, front, right, down, Z is down, so positive Z is down from the plane. In Unity, the Z-axis is positive up, so up from the ground or up from the screen. Then we have spatial reference systems. These are sort of the opposite end of it, which is, where is something on Earth? This is normally what we think of as geographic or geodetic coordinates, like latitude, longitude, and elevation, like WGS84. But there are also XYZ coordinate systems around Earth, like ESIF, like Earth-centered, Earth-fixed, which is a Cartesian coordinate system where the x-axis goes from the center of the Earth and out through 0 latitude, 0 longitude. And then the y-axis goes along the equatorial plane, but then points like 90 degrees along the equatorial plane. And then the z-axis is the third axis, which goes up through the pole, sort of orthogonal or perpendicular rather, to both of the previous angles. And then we have local tangent planes. Local tangent planes are, for example, compass directions. So imagine, the reason it's called a local tangent plane is, imagine that you are standing somewhere on Earth, and you hold a compass out and it says north is that way. Well, if you looked at how that person is pointing, if you follow that finger straight ahead, what you actually end up with is a line that goes out into space. And what you're doing is you're pointing along the local tangent plane. The plane, so the plane is like a flat surface, like a sheet of paper, that is tangent, so it barely touches that one point on Earth. And that's what you're pointing along. So anytime we talk about compass directions, it's as if you put a flat sheet at that point, and then you're putting directions according to that sheet. And perhaps, obviously, if you're in a different point on the globe, your sheet, your plane would be angled differently, it would be rotated differently, because north there is different than north here. And so we need to be able to talk about different northeast down systems, different compass direction systems, depending on where we are on Earth. Here too, I have mentioned northeast down is a common one. So the x-axis is north, the east axis is y-axis is east and the z-axis is down. This is commonly used in aerospace because usually you want to talk about things that are below you, like at the ground. And so it makes more sense for positive z coordinates to be down because that's where most things are. And you don't really want most of your coordinates to have a negative number in one of the axes. Meanwhile, in ground vehicles, it's more common to use east, north, up, where the x-axis is east, the y-axis is north, and the z-axis is up from the ground. And you might be confused about why these have north and east in different directions. This is another thing that will be complicated. So to put these things together, you need a spatial reference to tell you where on Earth. You need a tangent plane to tell you orientation at that place on Earth. And then you need a body reference to be able to talk about things in relation to yourself, where you are like an object in the world. Turns out that you can take any XYZ, any Cartesian coordinate system and move between them just by doing a rotation and a translation. So imagine I'm standing here and you're standing over here. If I say something is that way, then to make that angle relative to you, I have to rotate it to where you are. But if I just did a rotation, then that vector is still pointing from where I am. And so I want to translate it to where you are, and now it's pointing in the right direction. So every conversion between two frame of reference systems that are Cartesian, so have XYZ coordinates, are a rotation plus a translation, which mathematically can be expressed as a quaternion. You can kind of think of as a matrix. This only works in Cartesian systems, so WGS84, like GPS coordinates, are not Cartesian. So in general, you need to go via an additional coordinate system like the XYC thing around Earth in order to go transform between coordinate systems to get close to GPS, and then there's a conversion between GPS coordinates and ESIF that is relatively well defined. Okay, and then there's axes conventions, which we're going to ignore for now because they're not that relevant to what we're going to do. And then there's bearings, which we will actually get to, but enough to say about bearings. The bearings are things like they're azimuth and elevation. So they're like at 2 o'clock would be an azimuth. So it's a rotation along your sort of forward plane. And elevation, which is up from your forward plane. You can also do bearing in compass directions, right? So you could do, 2 degrees or 60 degrees from north and 10 degrees up. That's also a totally valid bearing. And there's all sorts of reasons why bearings are really complicated. I think the talk is going to be posted at some point. So if you're curious, you'll get to that. But all of this means that my head hurts, right? These things are wildly complicated and super annoying to deal with. And so I wanted to build a library that means that I don't need to fuck this up, or it's unlikely that I will mess this up. And in particular, it's not so much that I'm worried about getting it right one time. It's about getting it right repeatedly, right? Like someone else writes some code and I have to review it, or I wrote some code in the past and now I have to change it, or I'm writing some code and I'm trying to convince someone else that it's correct. All of these things I want the types to help me with, rather than just having to do these like random matrix multiplies and quaternion transformations myself, because that seems like it's just a mess. So I wrote Squaba to use types. Squaba comes from Celtic mythology. The Squaba twin, which is the Celtic word for the wave sweeper, was this like self-navigating boat that this Celtic saint called Manan Maclir had, that was navigated just by the thoughts of the pilot. So the thinking here is that you could navigate it without knowing about things like coordinate systems. You just thought where you wanted to go and it went there. And so it felt appropriate to build a spatial math library where you don't have to think about all of the math and call it the same thing. Okay, so this is what Squaba looks like. You construct a coordinate system with a macro called system. The inside there is like a struct definition, so you can write pub struct here. You could add like derive, serialize, like inside of the system macro, you just define a type, but you don't define any fields for it. It's like a marker type. You also describe what convention you're using. So here I'm saying plain FRD is using the FRD convention. So the XYZ axes are front, right, and down. Similarly, plain NED is using north, east, and down. And then it generates a bunch of other stuff for you so that all of the coordinate conversions and everything you get for free. Note that the reason you need to do this is because, as I mentioned, on Earth, for example, if you're in 2 different points on Earth, you have different NED systems. Your north is different from this north. And so we need to be able to have multiple coordinate systems and talk about them as different types so that we know this coordinate is in that one and this coordinate is in this one. And so they're not interchangeable unless we convert between them. Same thing for FRD. If there's a plane over here and a plane over there, they have different frames of reference. Okay, so we have coordinate systems as a type, and then we can construct coordinates in a given coordinate system. So here, for example, we want to say where the balloon is. So we create a coordinate where with the type parameter plane FRD, because it's a coordinate relative to the plane's front, right, down system. We want to construct it from a bearing. And the bearing is a combination of azimuth and elevation. So the azimuth is 60 degrees because we said 2 o'clock. 2 o'clock is 60 degrees. And the elevation is 30 degrees up because we said the pilot saw the balloon 30 degrees up from the windshield. And then note here that elevation needs to be in minus 90 to 90 degrees. It cannot be like, if you have an elevation of 110 degrees, then really you're not facing this way looking up by 110 degrees. You're facing this way and looking up by 70 degrees. And so this is why elevation is enforced to be in minus 90 to 90. And so hence the expect here. So the builder will not allow you to construct a bearing that doesn't have this property. And then at the end, we call build. Build uses a type state pattern to enforce that you've set both azimuth and elevation. Neither of them are defaulted to 0. And then when we say where this coordinate is, we give the bearing, and we also give the distance. So how far away is it? And that is sufficient to give you an XYZ coordinate. So behind the scenes, this gets turned into an XYZ. We also need to write down the orientation of the plane. So there's an orientation in plane NED using Tate-Bryan angles. So this is yaw, pitch, and roll, terms you might have heard before. So you see here, I give in 3 angles here. These are the yaw angles, so how much are we turned from north. Northeast is 45 degrees, northeast is 22.5. So that would be the yaw here. Pitch is how much you're pitching up. So that would be 10-degree climb, and we're not rolling, so we're not sideways. Okay, so that's our orientation in NED. And then we construct the GPS coordinates of the plane. It's like read out of some instrument. Notice here that latitude is similarly here. We have an expect on it. So it's like an unwrap with a message because the latitude also cannot be above 90 degrees. So 90 degrees latitude means basically the North Pole. If you had a 110 degree latitude, what that really means is you're that side of the Earth that much up. So latitude also will never go above 90. And so that's enforced by the library here. And then you end up with the thing that actually type checks. Now, we'll talk about the unsafety in a second here, but you can construct a transformation from here ESIF to NED using a method that's provided by the library where you say, I want to transform from ESIF to NED at the given GPS location. So at this location on Earth, give me a way to convert between ESIF, which is the XYZ world coordinates, and the local tangent plane, the NED plane at that point. And then I say, okay, now I need a conversion between the compass directions at that place and the plane at that place. So if we take a plane, plane as in PLANE here, that's oriented with north. And then I have my plane as in PLANE, damn it, that doesn't work. I have a flying plane that flies at some offset relative to north. Right? Then I need to tell the library how to convert between these directions and these directions because there's a rotation and translation in both of those as well. So the way we do it here, we take an orientation in NED and we map it as saying that orientation in NED. So the plane is like this in NED. That is 0 in FRD because forward in this is that angle in north. This is a little subtle, but like it's we're basically saying that the transformation from this to this is to say this is 0 when you measure it from here. If that was hard to follow, don't worry about it. The vibe coding will not be about this particular part. But now we have 2 transformations, so we can chain them. So we have a transformation that goes from ESIF to plane NED, and we have a transformation that goes from plane NED to plane FRD, and we can combine them because the middle type is the same, and we end up with a transform from ESIF to plane FRD. And this type checks. So if you tried to give the transformations the other order, or this transformation was for some other coordinate system, the and then here would not compile. It is part of the types that they must be connected correctly. And then once you have this confirmation, you can use transform, or in this case, inverse transform, because the transform here is from ESIF to plane FRD, and we want to go from plane FRD to ESIF. We want to go the other way. So we use an inverse transform to take the balloon observation in plane FRD to go into the balloon position in ESIF. And then ESIF we can convert to WGS84, which is GPS coordinates. And so now we can print out the location of the balloon in GPS coordinates. Okay. So that's the whole chain from start to finish. The unsafety, just I'm going to hand wave that away. That's explained in the README and the docs for Squaba why I think this is the right call. But it's not unsafety as in memory safety. It's unsafe as in type safety. Let's leave that alone for now. There's not any unsafe code in the true sense of unsafe in the Squaba library. Cool. So now we have this whole end-to-end thing. The thing that's really interesting, and the reason I chose Squaba here, is because all of the things that I've explained to you so far are actually pretty simple implementation-wise. The hard thing is to get the orders right and to make sure that the types correctly represent what coordinate something is in, what a transformation really represents, and that stuff. That's all done. The library exists and it works. What I want to vibe code here are a couple of improvements to the library that range from relatively simple to much more complicated. And so we'll walk through this, and in theory, I think the vibe coding here is going to be able to get us through 2 out of the 4 challenges I have. That's my current guess. The other thing that's interesting, and the other reason I chose Squaba here, is because all of this stuff about coordinate systems and quaternions and rotations, all of this stuff is explained all over the internet. Like this domain, even if it might be new to you, dear viewer, is actually very well known. It's not new, it's not modern, it's not recently developed, it's not even a Rust thing. It's very well known mathematical properties and conversions. So this stuff, I would expect that the like underlying knowledge is actually fairly well established. So now we're going to try the vibe coding, and the place we're going to start here, I have a little to-dos. First thing we're going to start with here is a bearing and WGS84 macro constructor with static elevation and latitude checks. So in particular, you'll notice here when I constructed a bearing, I used a builder and I gave in a azimuth and an elevation, but these I gave in as like, this is a builder at runtime, but these are constants. And so why do I need to have the expect in here? It would be much nicer if I just had a macro that let me define a bearing using azimuth and elevation as constants, and where the macro would statically check at compile time that my elevation was valid, and then it would just make sure that I never see the expect, right? That it just gets constructed correctly. So I want to vibe code adding that macro. And then I want us to do the same thing for WGS84, which has latitude, longitude, and altitude, where latitude, again, if the coordinate is well known, like known at compile time, it should be fine to have a macro that lets you construct this. Okay, so that's the first thing we're going to try to tackle. I've now spoken for quite some time. Let's pause there and see, does this make sense? Both what Squaba is, even if there's maybe a bunch of murky details in the middle about how it achieves what it does, but like why there's a crate for it in the first place, what the crate tries to do, and what the first thing we're going to try to do is. It feels like it should be vibe codable, right? It doesn't feel like it should be super complicated. But we're about to find out. Very understandable. Cool. All right. A const builder isn't possible. That's an interesting question. Would it be better to have this be a const builder? I don't think so, because the way that you get compile time assertions is by putting a panic in your code. Like you genuinely do panic. It's just the panic is triggered at compile time, and therefore the compiler knows to fail it at compile time rather than runtime. If we just made latitude here be a const fn, it could be a const fn actually. Most of the builder methods here could be const fns. The problem is it would still have to panic internally to trigger a compile time error. But if you are using the builder with a runtime value, so you can't use then if you're just giving it a runtime value, you're not calling it in a const context. Therefore, but you would still have the panic there. And so the expect would go away even for runtime construction. And in runtime construction, I don't want the implicit panic. I want it to be an explicit expect. So yes, the builder here could be constf n, but it wouldn't give me the property that I want. Okay. So let's start vibing. What I've done here is because I'm paranoid, I've set up a separate user on my computer. Really, it should be a separate VM, but it's not for now. So a separate user that has a checkout of Squaba right here. And we're just going to run Claude and see what Claude can do for us. And then over here, I have a checkout of the same thing. So here's what we're going to do. I've already run Claude init. So you'll see that there's not here, but there is a agentic Squaba Claude MD. So it's already generated a Claude MD, which came out of just running Claude init because it told me I needed to do a Claude init. So that one already exists because it took a while for that to get set up. Now we're going to see what happens. In the crate, there are builders for bearing and WGS84. However, if I have a however, I'd like a way for users to construct these without requiring an expect for elevation and latitude, respectively, when the angles for those are known at compile time. Give me a plan for maybe I want more than one plan, because it would be nice if you could tell me whether it agrees that the macro path is the right one or not. Give me some options for how to achieve this. Full stop, maybe? Give me some options for how to achieve this in a way that is both safe and ergonomic. Cool. Oh yeah, true. Don't forget to say please. Please shift tab twice to go into plan mode. Okay. I went into plan mode because some people said that was a good idea. Oh, please give me 3 options and their trade-offs for how to achieve this. All right, and now it's doing and inferring. We're already in plan mode. I switched. Okay, so it's analyzing the current bearing in WGS builders to understand the context. That's good. That seems like a reasonable thing to do. And so it's grepping for the struct builders. All the children in Africa will starve if the code is not perfect. Yeah, it's terrible, right? Okay, let's see what it said so far. It said, what do we have up here? Both current data elevation and latitude methods, the return an option because they validate the angles within the valid ranges. That's true. This forces users to call expect even though they know at compile time their angles are valid. Yep, that is indeed the prompt. 3 options. Option 1, cons constructors with unchecked variants. Yeah, so this is basically the proposal that came up in chat, right? You have a const n that takes the azimuth and elevation, and it will panic internally through const assertions. This is compile time validation prevents runtime errors. Yes. No expect calls needed. Yes. 0 runtime overhead. Kind of. It only works with const evaluatable expressions. That's not really a downside. That's fine. I specifically asked for when the values are known to compile time. It requires const generics or macro-based validation. Type-safe angle wrappers. Create wrapper types like valid elevation and valid latitude that can only be constructed with valid values. Then have the builder methods that accept these types without returning option. I don't think that works because I think you have the same problem here with new. Now I would need to unwrap the new, right? Because it returns an option. And then this other one that doesn't return an option with a const assertion would then be callable in non-const contexts, which I don't want. Option 3, builder method overloads with different return types. Add new builder methods with different names that accept raw degree values and panic on invalid input. Okay. So I don't like any of these. Would you like to proceed? No, keep planning. User rejected Claude's plan. I'm sorry, Claude. I should have said no. I won't. That feels too anthropomorphizing. I'm sorry, Claude. But that's not quite what I had in mind. I'd like for it to not be possible to use the panicking versions unless the values are known at compile time. That is, a user shouldn't be able to provide actually, I guess what I really want, it should not be possible to have this new constructor, it should not be possible to have this new constructor cause a runtime panic. It's pontificating. Even better. It's considering. What is it considering now? At this point, it has taken longer than writing it manually, I agree. But the interesting thing here, right, is that if it does well at this, in theory, I could have it do a bunch of these tasks and just go. That's at least that's the promise of agentic-ai, right? And maybe I can have like multiple of these running and I can like manage them through another AI. I'm not willing to dismiss it quite yet. Also, remember, this is one of the simpler setups. So we're aiming for something trickier in a second. Okay, what's it proposing instead? I understand. Yes, that is indeed what I want. Use const generics. This doesn't have that property. This is still callable. Oh, I see. The azimuth and elevation are const generics. Interesting. I don't think I want that because they need to be floating point. You need to be able to say like, 80.3 degrees. Const assertion macros. Natural syntax with macro calls. Compile time validation prevents any runtime errors. Macro messages can be less clear. That's true. And some IDs struggle with complex macros. We don't care about IDE support. That's fine. So we'd want bearing, system, azimuth, and elevation. There's an interesting question here about whether the system should be an argument to the macro, or whether the macro should be willing to construct a bearing of any type. Okay. And because this assertion happens here, it should be fine. I think I agree with that. The question is whether this usage is nice or not. Interesting. Option 3, a const builder pattern with phantom validation. Yeah, this has the same property of const generics. Okay, so it seems like it sort of landed on the option here as a macro, which seems fine to me. Would you like to proceed? No, keep planning. I recommend option 2 as it provides the best balance of flexibility and ergonomics while maintaining compile time safety. Which approach would you prefer to implement? I prefer approach 2 using macros because I need the values to be F64s. One problem with this macro, though, is that it's not clear how the user states whether the value is in degrees, radians, or some other angular unit. How do you propose? Please propose a version of it where the unit is clearly expressed by the user. Right? Because imagine that someone didn't know that bearing elevation was in degrees for some reason, and so they tried to give in like radians, then it's still just an F64. Let's see what it's proposing now. Option 2A. Okay, so one is you put degrees after. Yeah, so this requires that they're either both in degrees and both in radians. That I think that's fine. Using some constants, that seems fine. There isn't a from radians unchecked and from degrees unchecked, so I don't know where it's planning to get that from. Nested unit specification. No, I think I prefer the suffix. Unit specific macros. No, let's do option 2A. I like option 2A. I'll implement option 2B. No, I think I want 2A. Keep planning. Let's go with option 2A using the unit as a suffix. But please keep in mind that there is no from unchecked from constructor for these types. Keep in mind that there's no unchecked from constructor from these types, so we'll want to go through the builder internally in the macro. Yeah, so there's an interesting question here, right? Of like, has this been useful so far? Like, has it pointed out things that I hadn't thought of? I think the const generic approach I hadn't thought of, but it also doesn't work. So I don't know if that's all that useful. I think in a way, the realization that we need to provide the unit here is a good one. But that was my realization, not its realization. But I realized it from seeing what it proposed. Okay. Okay, what does it add now? Yeah. So it's going, let's do the assertion, use existing builder. Yeah. Same thing for latitude. And same thing for longitude. The one thing that's awkward here is that the altitude needs to be in meters. So let's maybe fix that. And I also wanted to use expected instead of unwrap. Add the berry macro, add the WGS84 macro. No, keep planning. That's almost right. Or let's do, we're almost there. Let's also use expect with a meaningful description of why it can't fail as an argument. And add support for kilometers as well for altitude. Yeah, it's a good question too, right? Of would you have thought of as many things in the process of implementing it myself? I think in this case, I probably would, because I've had enough exposure to this particular problem area. But I don't know whether, like, that might be just a me thing, right? Okay. Let's see. So it's added. Expect. Yeah. That's great. That looks fine. That also looks fine. It's interesting too that you see in the macro, it's specifically using the fully qualified path to the types, which is good. Like that, you want to do that in a macro. So that's a good choice. It's a little sad that it ends up with like a, it takes like the full product of all the possibilities here. So you have a degrees and meters, you have a degrees and kilometers, you have radians and meters, you have radians and kilometers. So maybe let's do, no, maybe we call that good enough. I think let's do that. Okay. Yes. Let's do it. Ends up at a proc macro, I know, right? So let's see. So now it's adding these things. And I guess we can go over here and we can cd to the agentic squaba. See what we got here. Oh, why is this no longer a Git repository? What? That's interesting. Why did this stop being a Git repository? Or I guess it's just not a Git repository for me for some reason. Okay, so it's gonna add this to directions.rs. Safe way to construct variants with compile time known angles, limited for expect calls in the elevation validation. Using degrees, using radians. That seems fine to me. Yes, please. Yeah, like why is it decided? I don't quite understand why git status. Ah, dubious ownership in this repository. Cool. Let's do that. Let's do this. Aha, great. Oh, okay. So it's doing some sad things with adding spaces in here. I don't know why it has trailing spaces. So that we're gonna have to fix back up. And then in geodetic.rs, it adds this. Yeah, that seems fine. That seems fine. The macro still like makes me a little sad that it has to be that expressive, but okay. I am really curious to see what tests it adds, actually. Okay, so what do we have in direction here? Bearing macro. Yeah, I'm still not sure whether I want the FRD in there or whether I want the user to have to write let bearing 1 colon coordinate angle bracket FRD equals and then the bearing constant. Because there is, so we do actually have a precedent for this. So if you look at coordinate, there's a macro for constructing a coordinate. Macro rules here. And you'll see that here, I actually used a suffix of in FRD. And I think maybe I want that instead. So let's tell it that. Actually, I think I want this macro to look a bit more like coordinate and vector. So to have the chosen coordinate system as a suffix like in FRD instead. What do you think? Geodetic or have I misspelled geodetic? Geodetic? I don't know anymore now. Geodetic? Oh, it is geodetic. Oh man. That's a big bug we gotta fix. Totally right. Okay, let's see. So now I've asked it to change that, and it's move those things around. Now, I forget whether this makes it optional. Yes, so I want this rule as well, because I want it to be optional. No. That's almost right. But coordinate and vector both also allow the macro to be called without specifying the target coordinate system. Take a look at the first match arm for each of those macros at match arm for the definition of each of match arm of the definition of each of those macros. It is an interesting structure to, like, this is the same kind of way I would prompt someone who, like, if I asked someone else to make this change and they weren't very familiar with Rust macros, for example, this is the kind of prompting I would give them. It's like, go look at this one over here instead. Like, I did it in this other macro. Take a look at that. Let's see what it says here. So it looks for the definition there. Forwards to the version within underscore when no coordinates have been specified. Yep. So it's going to update this. Let's see what we got. So... yeah, so this bearing 2 isn't going to work because it's not going to be inferred because something needs to specify the type. So that's not actually going to work. I don't think the bearing 2 line in the doc test will work because the compiler won't be able to infer any type for the desired coordinate system. I think for that line, you'll need to add a type specifier to bearing 2, like coordinate FRD. Yeah, I mean, in a way, it's surprising it doesn't run the doc test itself, right? I mean, I can prompt it to do that. Oh, it's thinking. The user is absolutely right. I love how it's like, it's this inner monologue. Oh man, he's right. It is true though. So this next bit is pretty good, well observed, right? So for the doc test example, if we want to show using the macro without specifying the coordinate system, we either need to add the type annotation, like I said, or use the bearing in a context where the type can be inferred, or just remove that example. And indeed, it says I'm right, and then it actually tells me. That's really funny. Cool. So now it's gonna go with that for the explicit one, this one, and that one. Yeah, that looks fine. There is a really interesting observation someone made in chat here, right? Like, if I have to do this prompting, wouldn't I rather teach a person this so that they can get better at it, rather than teaching this? I teach this to the AI and then no one else benefits from it. Maybe. Cool. So it's going to do up to the definition here. That's fine. Yeah, let's do it. Although it's interesting because this doesn't bode super well for the other changes, but we shall see. Cool. Now it's going to do the same thing for WGS84. Okay, so what are the tests it adds for the bearing macro? I'm still curious about what it thought here about WGS84. Yeah, okay, so this is a good observation, right? So with bearing, you need to specify the target coordinate system. With WGS84, you don't, because the target type is just WGS84. There's no generic to it. And as it says, since WGS84 doesn't need a coordinate system specification, it's already a specific coordinate system, I don't think it needs a semicolon in pattern. It should just be this. But let me double check if there are any other, if they're a different pattern. All right, cool. What is it testing? Explicit coordinate system, degrees with an inferred coordinate system. Checks here. That's not going to work because but it's using D, which is a helper function that's used in the other tests. So actually, if we go to direction, you go to the bottom here, you'll see here that in a bunch of the tests, I'm like comparing azimuth, for example, to D here, and D is actually just a helper function I've defined at the top so that you can give degrees as an F64 and you get it back in a like well-typed angle without having to write the whole angle new degree. And I guess it picked up on that pattern from the other tests, and so it's using that. It's nice to see. Checking the azimuth is 20, the elevation is 10. Inferred coordinate system, radians with an explicit one, radians with inferred, boundary conditions, radians at boundaries. Yeah, that's fine. It is missing a test that will panic though. Or in fact, it shouldn't even panic, right? There should be a test that is a compile time failure that I think would be really interesting. Let's see if it realizes it should add that test itself. Oh, it's going to add the test for the WGS84 macro. These are probably going to be very similar. Latitude, longitude. Not sure why it's... Oh, it should be converted to meters because the input was kilometers. Okay, that's fine. Boundary values for latitude and longitude. I wonder if it'll run into problems with these radians because of approximate floating point numbers, but we shall see. Cargo test. Yeah, that's fine. And you can run cargo test. But that's not gonna work though. Oh. The macro is having trouble parsing negative numbers. Because I didn't miss this actually. It's using the TT token type in the macro, but it needs to be using the literal type. It should not be using expression. Actually, expression is fine as long as it's a const expression. No, because if it's a... Yeah, okay, that's fine. So those need to be expressions so that they can be an arbitrary expression. If these are runtime expressions, then the const assert down here will fail. So that's fine. Get the test coded first. Yeah, I could have made it do the test first, I suppose, and then just asked it to do this using its own tests rather than, you know, prompting me a bunch. Create systems builder. That's fine. Yeah, now it runs into the fact that if you use an expression, then you're not allowed to have arbitrary. You're not allowed to have the next expression to just white space. There are only certain things you can have follow an expression. Different syntax with units specified differently. Oof, no, I don't like that. Nope. No. So here there's an interesting question about whether we just want to force it to be only literals for now, which don't have this restriction, or whether we're fine with expressions and then we switch to the radians and then a bracketed expression instead. I'd like to avoid specifying a single unit for the whole macro because one day we may want to change it such that the different arguments can be specified with different units. Let's instead switch to the syntax deg or rad. And we'll see how it comes out with that. Non-experienced dev could accept the first iteration, and that's an issue. It's true, but I mean, it's not like the need for review goes away, right? But it is true that I don't feel like its suggestions have been particularly good. Like I've had to apply my own judgment here, right? Oh no, now it decided to also add support for arbitrary units. And now it's just macros blowing up. I don't want that. No. Let's not proactively add support for mixed units. We can leave that as a to-do for later. As currently it would make the macro pretty ugly. Feels like it's replacing your keyboard, not your brain. That is how I feel about it too. And again, this is the first of the things on my list. So I mentioned that I have other things. So the next one is a yaw pitch role builder. So remember in the presentation, actually I can go back to it. So to construct a orientation, you give taint Bryant angles, which are yaw, pitch, and roll. And here the order is important. It's important that the yaw comes first, then the pitch, then the roll, because these are intrinsic rotations. So the pitch is applied after you rotate with your yaw. rather than the pitch being applied first and then you rotate. This doesn't matter for yaw and pitch, but it does matter for roll. So imagine the plane rolls and then you apply pitch. That's different from if you apply the pitch and then roll. So you end up with two different angles. And so it actually matters that it's first the yaw, then the pitch, then the roll. And that's the reason I put this in function calling syntax rather than as a builder, because as a builder, you'd be able to set them in arbitrary order. And if you could set the pitch before the yaw, you'd then be surprised to observe that the yaw took effect first. The way to get around this with a builder would be to have a builder that uses the type state pattern to say that the yaw is the only thing that can be set, and it must be set first. So you create a builder, the only method on it is yaw. Once you've set the yaw, then the only method you can call on it is to set the pitch. Once you've set that, the only thing you can set on it is the roll, and only when you've set that can you call build. So that would enforce that same ordering. Whether it'll be able to do that, I'm not sure. I don't know whether that's easier or harder than this. Keep it simple from now. Radians with an expression. Yeah, let's do it. It's puttering. I like all these synonyms for thinking. Oh, it's still too hot in here, but at least it's not as bad as last week. Made the same change over here. That seems fine. Now, the one thing that I will say is nice about this is that, oh, it could be really cool here to, instead of using meters and kilometers, use an ident here, and then have a separate macro that expands ident plus value into like a multiplier with the right conversion factor between meters and kilometers. But that's neither here nor there. What was I saying? Oh yeah, the nice thing here is that when I change my mind, like here where, we realize that you can't use the suffix approach because then it has to be a literal, it can't be any expression. And it'd probably be nice to be able to use expressions like so that you can write, I don't know, 45 divided by 2 as the degree you give in. And I could just sort of tell it to do that differently and then it would do it. I could obviously go change it manually or use like a grep or something to replace it. But this way I don't have to, which is nice. Why do the order and the builder matter for calculations? It doesn't matter for the calculations. The calculations will always be yaw, then pitch, then roll. But it matters for the user's perception. So if the user is allowed to set the pitch and then, or set the roll and then the pitch and then the yaw, like set them in reverse order, they might expect that they are applied in that order, but they are not. And so that's why I want to force them to specify yaw, pitch, roll, so that they can't possibly be confused about the order in which they are applied. Yeah, this is fine. Have you tried jujutsu? No, I haven't yet. It's on my list somewhere. Okay. It's succeeded at running the test. Complete the to-do, run a broader test to make sure we haven't broken anything. Okay, that's fine. Now it's running a whole bunch of tests. I don't really need it to run all the tests here, but it's fine. There we go. Okay. Yes. However, there are no negative tests here. That is tests that will not compile. Tests that should not compile because the compile time provided values are not within the valid range. To add these, I think the easiest way is to add doc tests probably directly on the macro with the compile fail attribute. Make sure that they fail to compile for the right reason, though. And this too is also the kind of prompting that I do to engineers that I work with, right? Where I will tell them, oh, there is this thing called a compile fail doc test that you can use to check that something doesn't compile. Just make sure that you actually run it once to see that the output of it failing to run is what you would expect. Cool. Compile fail. Squaba elevation greater than 90. Elevation less than 90. Greater than half radian. And less than half negative pi radians. Yes. I guess I do want... They do need to be different doc tests because you want to check that each of them compile fail. It's just annoying that you have to repeat the definition. So actually, I'm going to tell it, let's also make use of the prefix in these compile fail doc tests so that they don't repeat the use and system calls for each one, as they don't add too much to the user experience here. And I think, you know, one interesting observation here is that this is what I mean when I say that a decent amount of the work that I do feels like it's not really like application of patterns. I mean, it's doing decently well at this. You know, it's not like this is useless. It's producing things that are mostly right. It's able to roughly follow commands, but it's not like it's operating on its own here. I feel like I do keep having to guide it along the way, but I think it's because it has to produce things that don't really exist anywhere else, and that's why it requires all the prompting. And this is a suspicion on my end, but I suspect that if I asked it to build like a CLI that like downloads a file from an S3 bucket given a key, it would just like single pass construct it easily, right? And it's because that's not what I'm doing that I have to keep helping it along so that it knows which smaller patterns to be applying and combining. Cool. So now it's hidden those lines, which is what I wanted. Cool. Yes, let's do that. And then for latitude, yeah, that looks fine. Is it actually compile fail? Now I'm Rustdoc compile fail. Yeah, okay, great. Perfect. All the compile fail doc tests are passing, which means they're correctly failing to compile for the right reason. Ah, you haven't checked that it's for the right reason. Let me verify the error message are meaningful by testing one of the failing cases manually to see what the error message produces. Yes, good. I don't think that'll work. Why is it trying to create this in /temp? It's not going to be able to run that in... You're not going to be able to run a Rust code file in temp. because you need dependencies and such, and would thus need a whole cargo project there. Instead, try to just add an example that we can then later remove. Cool. Yeah, go for it. Yeah, it would be really nice to be able to tell compile fail how it should fail. The reality, though, is that if you want really sophisticated compile fail errors, then you would use something like, oh, I forget the name of the crate now. Rust compile fail assert. There's a, what's it called? It's not static assertions. It's called, fork the compiler. No. Oh, try build. That's the one. Try build. This guy. Which lets you write tests where you assert things about what the compiler outputs about a piece of code. But I think that's a little bit of a heavy-handed thing to include here. Test compiled on validation error message. Yeah, and you can cargo run. That's fine. Okay. Yeah, so if you look here, running that example, panicked, elevation must be minus 90 to 90, which is exactly what we wanted. Perfect. The message is exactly what we want. And it's called a compile time with error E0080. And now it's going to try the same thing for WHS84. That's fine. And now it removes that file. That's fine. And now let's see. Yeah, you can't run doc test that way. That also doesn't work. There we go. Good job. Cool. So I think now it's done this thing. What do we got here? Summary. Okay, it's added these. It's verified them. It has clear error messages. It's cleaned up the doc tests. Perfect. Thank you. Can you please write a commit this with a message that explains, I can't type, explains the trade-offs we've made here, both for the rad expr syntax, maybe it's really just that. That explains any non-obvious, let's give it a challenge, trade-offs we've made here in the design or implementation, such as using deg expr over expr deg. And then to make it slightly harder too, try to wrap any prose, not code, in the commit message to match git commit conventions. Yeah, I was planning to do a clean before the next thing. It's honking. Honking is not a synonym for thinking. Yeah, it can get add. That's fine. Oh, what did it say? It said something up here that looked like it was getting to the end of its context. Let's see what that looks like. Okay, okay, the first line is already too long. Nope. The first line of that commit message is too long and does not fit with git commit conventions. Let's try to make the title fit with semantic commits conventions as well. Okay, let's see if it got any better. Okay, it added feet. That's good. Compile time safe bearing and WGS8 macros. Good, good, good. This looks better. Introduces macros for constructing bearing and WGS8 values. Eliminating runtime panics for known valid angles. Users can now write in system instead of requiring expect calls. No. When you refer to types or very short code snippets, please place them in backticks. Also, when you have a full line of code or more than one line of code, put them in indented code blocks, please. So I gotta tell it all my preferences. This is the kind of stuff that I would put in ClaudeMD though, right? Like this is how I like my commit messages to look. It is not something I want to repeat every time. All right. Just gonna write. Yeah, now we're talking instead of requiring expect calls. Like what does it think are the trade-offs? Degrad to work with this macrosystem. Yep. 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 Const assertions. That's fine. Cool. The only thing that I wanted to run. Yeah, that's fine, actually. I have a feeling we're going. Oh. That's fine. Yeah, that's fine. What do I want it to commit at? I think I'll have it do this instead. I will just manually fix this. Why is my history corrupted? That feels unfortunate. I want this to be john@thesquareplanet.com. And I want this to be John Jenks at AI. What's the config option for setting this globally? Global? Global. Cool. I've set it up now, so if you try again, everything should be good. Please make sure you have run cargo format before you commit. Oh yeah, context left until auto compact, 19%. Yeah, I've heard about the auto compact and how you really want to avoid it. So it's actually fitting maybe that we're getting to the end here. The other thing I'll do while we're at it here is I'll go back up and grab my grab my instructions for git. Oh, I'm not allowed to edit that file, huh? Sudo su. Actually, sudo nvim claude. Why not? Let's make it easy. Let's go down here and we say git commit conventions. When writing commit messages, please ensure that you explain any non-obvious trade-offs we've made in the design or implementation. Wrap any prose, but not code, to match git commit conventions. What else did I write it? This. In particular, including the title. Also, follow semantic commit conventions for the commit title. Cool. I think that's all the prompting I gave it for this. So now we have that for later. And so now let's see that it ran cargo format, commits the changes, no changes to that. This is now good. Proceed. Git commit. I'm fine with the co-authored by. It's a good question. So I have the, I don't think it tells me how much it costs because I have the like pro plan. That's a good question. Let's see if I go to Claude. I'll do my phone so I don't have to log into everything on the screen. Let's see if it tells me a cost. Login. Sign in. Let's see what it says. Oh, /cost? /cost. Yeah, okay. That's what I figured. But is there a way for it to tell me the cost even though I have the subscription? That's what I want to know. Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, I think we now have this feature. So if I now look at git status, that's fine. Git log. We have a great big commit message here, except notice that the exclamation marks are incorrectly escaped. So let's go ahead and amend that. The symbols in the git commit message you just wrote are incorrectly escaped. Can you please fix that by amending the commit? Is that a thing it can do? And let's, I guess, add that to the Claude as well. Make sure that any exclamation symbols in the git message are correctly escaped. It's still escaping the exclamation marks. Let's try single quotes around the entire message. Wait, is this just a... No, this is definitely it, getting it wrong. I wonder if this is a... Like, it's still... Huh. Okay, so now it's going to try to put this in temp. That's fine. That looks better. Cool. It was trying to give it as a giant argument to... That's not where that file is. The argument here on 2 is just the wrong path, but I will allow this remove. It thinks it's a relative path to here, but it's actually an absolute path. Cool. Okay. So now we have that. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to fetch agentic so that I have that commit in a different repos where that agentic, the user can't get to. Okay, so now let's go back here. And I think now let's do a clean. Oh no, it's /clear. That's what I meant. Stop that. Clear. Cool. We are back. Okay, so now we have that commit. We've done feature 1. And we're at what? When did it start? Okay, technically I guess we started like a half an hour in. So we started at 6. So we've done an hour and a half to add that feature. Feels like longer than it would have taken me to do it myself, but I think it did okay. I think it did okay. All right, so let's now try feature number 2. So feature number 2 is this yaw pitch role builder. So here's what I will try to explain to it. Currently, the constructor for... do I need to tell it to read the ClaudeMD again? I think I'm actually going to make it exit and start it again, just in case it reads it from scratch. Okay, so it's true. I mean, a bunch of the time is spent by me talking as well, which we gotta, to be fair to Claude here, we gotta take that into account. When constructing an orientation or rotation using Tate-Bryan angles, the constructor currently takes 3 F64 arguments. Since Tate-Bryan angles are intrinsic rotations, since Tate-Bryan rotations are intrinsic, actually, let's write it slightly differently. This constructor is not using the builder pattern, unlike most other constructors in the crate. This is because Tate-Bryan rotations are intrinsic, and so I want the constructor to, and so I want to communicate to the user that they cannot choose a different order for the arguments. However, we run the risk of users accidentally passing in the wrong angles, or passing in the angles in the wrong order, and thus having bugs. Oh, let's switch to plan mode, I guess. So I'd like to add a builder constructor that still enforces that yaw is set first, then pitch, then roll, but also make sure that those arguments are all, that those values are all passed in through named functions or fields. How do you think we should do this? It takes more time to tell the stupid thing what you want than to write your own. Maybe. It is interesting, like if you did this with voice to text, like maybe that speeds things up. We'll see. It does help that I know a lot about the topic here, right? Otherwise, it could easily run into a problem. All right, let's see what we got. The user is describing a specific problem with constructors in the Rust crate. They have Tate-Bryant angle constructors. Currently take 3 arguments, but want a builder pattern that still enforces the order, prevents argument order confusion, maintains the semantic that rotations are intrinsic. First, you gotta go look at the code base. Yeah. Understand the current implementation. Start by exploring the code base. Search all the files. Good engineering. It's not allowed to look at the whole file. I guess it doesn't want to pollute its context too much, so it tries to just look for the files that are relevant. Yeah, okay. What else we got here? So it found the constructor, which indeed looks like that. Then it's looking for other builders, including the ones that it used previously, but it doesn't know that, of course. Okay. And it realizes that it has to do a step-by-step building pattern. Okay, good. Orientation from Tate-Bryant angles and rotation from Tate-Bryant angles. Take 3 F64 angle arguments directly. Yep, that's fine. Uses a type state builder pattern. Yeah, so this is the current builders have, like, in fact, we can go look at it. So if you look at something like direction, if I look at the builder here, you'll see that the setup for the builder is that it has an argument for the coordinate system that we're building a bearing for, and then it has azimuth and elevation, where each of those are generics that are either set to has azimuth or missing azimuth, and has elevation and missing elevation. So you end up with a type that reads like bearing NED has azimuth missing elevation. And then the methods are constructed so that if once you set azimuth, then the has azimuth flag gets set, and the elevation type parameter is unchanged. And this means you can set them in any order. And that's not specifically not what we want for the rotations here. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see whether we get here before we hit the usage limit for the pro plan. I think we should. Yep, each setter moves the build from one set to another. Only build can only be called when they're all set. Great. This is the main thing we're trying to enforce. I can design a similar typeset builder pattern that enforces using phantom types. Provide clear method names like yaw, pitch, and roll. Only allows build when all 3 are set in the correct order. Works for both orientation and rotation. Why are these in a weird order? Okay, that's fine. Builder struct tracks angle states. Yeah, so I don't actually think that it needs to track these separately because the order is enforced. I think you can just track which one was the last one that was set. And so you only need one argument here. I don't think you need three. I think you also might need in here because calling build, I guess you would build rotation or build. Yeah, so maybe the builder does not need this type. Phantom types. Yep. That's fine. I can see exactly what you're dealing with. Okay, great. Yep, we use builder patterns in a bunch of places. We must call yaw first, then pitch, then roll. Keep the current from Tate right angle methods. Use the same tight state builder as the other builders. So it wants an API that looks like this. Tate Bryan builder, yaw pitch roll build. Tate Bryan builder, yaw pitch roll build. Implementation plan. Do we agree with this implementation plan? I don't think it needs all these markers. Let's see if it can figure out how to avoid that. No, keep planning. I think you can avoid using 3 type parameters here, since you know that the parameters will be set one at a time and in a specific order. Let's phrase it as a question. See what it does. We're vibing, remember? You can trigger more thinking by adding the word think. Ultra think. I like ultra think. That sounds very serious. All right, let's see what it came up with now. You're absolutely right. Since we know the exact sequential order, we can use a much simpler approach with just one type parameter that represents the current state. Looking at existing code patterns, I can see this approach used in the bearing builder, which transitions through states like missing azimuth to has azimuth in sequence. I guess kind of. I mean, bearing has both azimuth and elevation, so it's not really a great example, but let's see. Yeah, we can use a single type parameter that represents a current step in the process. So this is actually a really good example of where, you know, the saving grace, I think, in a way, for these systems, right, is that while it has never seen the overall thing I'm trying to achieve before, so it can't one-shot solve the thing, it has seen examples of type state patterns, it has seen examples of builders, and it has seen examples of type states where you need one more field to be set. And so as long as I can tell it which patterns to combine, then it can construct my final outcome that I want. But it does mean that I need to do a decent amount of prompting to like get it to figure out which patterns to replicate. It needs yaw, needs pitch, needs roll, and complete. Yes, I think I agree with that. So this is a builder. It has a state, and it goes through those states. That seems pretty good to me. The other reason this won't work is because I think you're going to end up with 2 builder types, one for orientation and one for rotation, that are identical except for the build method, and that feels unnecessary. Won't this end up with 2 identical builder types, one for rotation and one for orientation? Can we instead just have one builder somehow? Perhaps by adding a second type parameter that indicates what we're in the process of building. Now, this is like an interesting question. Would it be faster for me to do this part myself? Because like the realization here, like I think everything so far is sort of what I expected. in this particular, implementation plan. But this like, okay, we got to add another parameter, and that parameter needs to ensure that if we're building an orientation, we get a builder that we're calling .build will build us an orientation. Then that like would require writing a bunch of stuff. So let's see what it gets to here. I want to see its thinking too. Brilliant insight. Wow, it's called us brilliant. Look at us go, chat. The D function is a test helper, which is another interesting thing, but it's sort of using the test helper here just in the explanation, even though it won't be able to use that in the actual implementation, but I think that's okay. I'd prefer Claude to cuss me out. Yeah, I know, right? Can you save on tokens by asking it to be more terse, excluding things like you're right? Yeah, but I like when it says I have a brilliant insight. I'll take that. It is true. Like at some point, is it really agentic coding, or is it just me telling it exactly what to do? But I don't think that's quite right either, right? Because it's not like I'm telling it what letters to type in what order. I'm like, the prompting here is still fairly high level. It's like I'm giving it an implementation plan. It's not really thinking of the plan itself, but it is figuring out what code needs to exist, which like maybe saves me some stuff. Okay, so it two type parameters, one that's a state and one that's a target. So there's an orientation target and a rotation target. There's a builder, which keeps the state and the target. Orientation, plain NED, Tate Bryan builder, gives you back an orientation target, plain NED. And that gives you back a rotation target from 2. Build. And then you put a different build implementation based on the target type. I think that's right. That also means that the builder for rotation can still be unsafe while the orientation one is safe. That's a good insight. Constructing a rotation is unsafe, and we would want the build method of a rotation to still be unsafe, but not the one for orientation. So that's a cool implication. It's too bad it didn't think of that itself. Okay. Implement Tate Bryan builder complete orientation target with a safe build that gives you orientation in, with an unsafe build that gives you rotation from 2. The entry points are going to be Tate Bryan builder. Yeah, although I think I maybe want it to be called build Tate Bryan, maybe the Tate Bryan builder. Maybe it's okay. Cool. Yeah, let's do it. Auto accept edits. It is high level, but someone who does not know how to program wouldn't be able to do it, and it seems that vibe coding promises that. So yes and no, right? If you think about it, this might not be something that someone who couldn't do programming would be able to do, but also they wouldn't be trying to do this task in the first place. This is a task that is very programmer oriented. So I kind of think that that's okay. The question isn't whether someone who doesn't know how to program can do this. I think the real question is whether someone who is a programmer but doesn't know all this stuff really well could do it. Even there, though, I think the answer, unfortunately, might be no, right? Or it's a qualified no, because I had to tell it about the different type state sub patterns to be using, which like is decently sophisticated knowledge here. I wonder if you're being more verbose than necessary with your communication of problems. Probably. I could probably give it a much briefer commands and not be quite as nice. It's an interesting question. I guess we can try it on the next one, right? Would it make sense for the phantom data for state and target to be phantom data fn to t, since these types are referring to what's being returned, or does it not really matter? They're not referring to what's being returned, though, because notice it constructed the separate type called like orientation target and rotation target, which are not the actual target type. But that is a good question, though. We could maybe ask it to avoid introducing the extra type by using an FN, having the type be an FN2, a phantom data FN2 rotation, for example. Could very well be. Okay, let's go up and see what it's done so far. Whoa, that's a whole lot of code. All right, starts by creating a unified builder infrastructure. As a builder module. Ooh, it's gonna be confused. So if you look at our librs, you'll see that there is a builder. There's a builder module, but that builder module is a re-export to have a slightly nicer module hierarchy. So I don't actually want it to add implementation here. I would want it to add a re-export here, but the actual implementation somewhere else. Let me create the new builder in the math.rs files, since the builder would create both rotation and orientation, and then expose it through the builder module. Maybe. Okay, so in math. Okay, so the builder here is going to be used by both math for rotation and engineering for orientation. So the question is, where should it live? Fine with it living at math. Unified builder for constructing both rotation and orientation from Tait-Bryan angles. It forces intrinsic order, yaw, pitch, roll, at compile time while providing named parameters to prevent argument or confusion. Uses type states to ensure angles are set in the correct order and can construct either a rotation with unsafe or an orientation safe. I don't think we need to derive anything for the marker structs here. Although if you don't derive things for them, then it wouldn't be able to derive it for this either. So you couldn't derive debug for this unless you derive debug for the marker types. You would need to write a manual implementation of debug, which sometimes you do. Yeah, I think that's okay. It would be nice, I agree, to get rid of these extra target types. Rotation about Z is indeed yaw. Rotation about Y tick is because it's Y after applying the first rotation. And then roll, which is rotation about X double tick, so after both previous rotations. That's the intrinsic part. That's fine. Okay. Manual inputs to avoid requiring state and target to be cloned and copy. But it didn't do the same for debug. And it also still made them clone and copy, even though they don't need to be. That's interesting. These work for any target type. That's true. The yaw, pitch, and roll methods you should have for any target type. Initially sets a 0. That's fine. Sets the angle. That's fine. So when you set the yaw, the next thing that's needed is pitch. And this method is only available on needs yaw. And it preserves the pitch and the roll. When it needs the pitch, the only thing you can set is the pitch, which indeed sets the pitch. And then it returns needs roll. Roll is the same thing. Now it's complete. And finally, you get a build method when the target is orientation. Self yaw, pitch, and roll. And this one. Yep, this is unsafe because you're asserting a relationship with the coordinate systems from and to. Will allow type safe conversion between the coordinate systems. This assertion must be correct. Yep. Okay, so this is mostly copying the safety comment from the existing Tate Bryan constructor for rotation. So this looks pretty good. Now it needs to add the entry points for both rotation and orientation. So the thing that lets you construct the thing in the first place. 2 matches string to replace, but replace all is false. Okay. Let's see where else it got to here. Okay, it struggled a little bit. There's 2 Tate Bryan angles and Euler angles. It shouldn't change either of those. Okay, so it's added now this thing. Let's see what this looks like. Construct 2, construct this. It refers back to from Tate Bryan angles. I like that safety comment. Gives you back a builder that needs yaw with a rotation target. And it just constructs a new of the builder. And then for orientation, yeah, I think maybe we want to add a deprecation message to the old constructor as well to tell people to prefer the builder. This is going to add, okay, so it's adding to the builders module in source lib a mod Tate Bryan that uses those out. That seems fine as well. Now it adds some tests. What do these tests look like? And it checks that the quaternions to get constructed for the rotation are basically the same. That seems reasonable. And it's doing the same thing for the rotation. This is checking. This is not checking that you can only call build after roll. Yeah, so this is just a test with comments about the failure cases. So we're gonna have to tell it that. Okay, that one I don't care too much about. Okay, and now it's like looking for the helper function, which it adds. That's fine. And then it needs to fix the imports. Now the tests run. And then it's updating ClaudeMD. Cool. No, I need to tell it a couple of things. Let's see. Did we keep track of the things we needed to tell? A couple of... actually, let's try to make it briefer then. To see if it still does the right thing if I'm not quite as articulate when speaking to it. Avoid adding a new type for orientation for target. Just use rotation and orientation directly. With the phantom type being FNT. Also, put the tests for what shouldn't work in compile fail tests. I should really put that in ClaudeMD, I think. What else did we observe that could change? There was one more somewhere. Skip the tests about using different angle units because they don't add too much. And I think that was maybe all. Avoid unnecessarily deriving clone and copy on the marker types. Deriving clone. Let's see if we can get rid of debug too. It shouldn't need debug. And debug on the marker types. And check that cargo doc does not produce any warnings about invalid, about I want to check that you don't end up with missing links, about incorrect doc links. Go. Okay, so this is a fairly concise prompt, right? Where I'm telling it to make like 5 different changes to the thing it proposed so far. It is more like pure programming with AI than vibe coding. I think that's right, but I feel like that's more the style that is likely to work here. But I mean, tell me, how should it be different, right? Do you think there's another way to do this that would have worked way better? Yeah, that's fine. Phantom data has copy, clone, and derive implemented on it, so the inner type shouldn't need them. Well, hopefully it realizes that, right? Well, we'll see whether it does. All right, let's see what changes it makes. So it got rid of all the derives and the target types. And then it got rid of... but I still want debug on the builder. So hopefully it'll add those back. Because I still want the builder to be debug, clone, and copy. And copy, honestly. Sure. And then it did get rid of the target type. So that's really nice. That was a good suggestion in chat. And then it changed this caller to get rid of those. Just let the vibes take over. Cool. They got rid of the thing I wanted to get rid of. Add them to the main builder documentation. I say to the Tate Brand builder. That seems fine. What does that look like? Can I call build before setting all the angles? Can I call pitch? Wait, can I call pitch before yaw? But this test doesn't try to call pitch before yaw. That first doc test is broken. This yaw and roll. Okay, that is wrong indeed. Okay, so that's fine. And I was sad that it didn't update its to-dos as it was going. I thought that was part of its job. I think that first compile fail test doesn't actually check the right thing. Because it doesn't try to set... What was it was trying to set? Set yaw at all. It... check that each compile fail test fails for the right reason. Also, make sure the builder type is still, the builder type itself is still debug, clone, and copy. Oh, and use and show me the to-dos as you're working through them. See if it realizes what that means. Aha! It updated the to-dos. Now I get a to-do list. Good. Okay, so it's understanding that part. And we forgot to add, or did we add to Claude? No, so we need to add instructions about the way to test compile fail things. Did we give up on what? Vibe coding? Vibe coding is what we're doing, man. We're vibing so much. Role method doesn't exist. Okay. Too much code on the screen for that. I don't know. This is not that much code on screen. This is just Claude. But I am scrolling it up to look at what that code is. That's true. I think there's an interesting question here. Yeah, I don't think this works. I don't think it's tested that this works, because I don't think it does. Like, the derive will exist, but the derive will be wrong because the derive will require that state is clone and copy. Can you add to claude.md actually, let's go to the start here. Test each compile fail block using an example file that we can then remove later. Can you also add to Claude some instructions for yourself about how to correctly write and compile fail tests? Oh, we're getting up towards the end of the compact window. Also, make sure the derives for the builder actually work with some tests. The derived problem is the type of thing it's easier to just go and fix yourself. It's true, but it's also something that, like, so many people talk about, and like this is a well-known problem in the Rust space, right? So it feels like it should be able to just fix it. If you actually try just pure vibe coding, it would just fail. That's probably true. It'd be funny to have some freelancers hired by Claude watching the stream and listening for your feedback. It's true. Maybe I should just reach out to like Anthropic and be like, hey, I tried using your thing. Go look at where it worked and when it didn't. Okay, let's go back and see what it's done here. I don't think that's gonna work. To test these examples, use cargo, not Rust C directly. But let's make these examples, not binaries. That's vibing. If that's not a vibing comment, I don't know what to tell you. Yeah, that's fine. Reticulating doesn't feel like a word. Yes, that's fine. Yeah, like trying to run Rust-C directly is just clearly wrong, right? Yeah, that's fine. You can move all those files. I'm gonna be pedantic. Yeah, that's fine. I was looking for pedantic definitions of vibe coding. It necessarily implies not looking at or attempting to understand the actual code. It's all prompts and results without consideration for important things, and I do not like it at all. Yeah, I think someone made a good point here in the in the comments here that if I were to do that, I think it wouldn't be particularly interesting, right? I feel like you would end up with a like we would just observe that it doesn't work and then go home, which doesn't feel that useful. Okay, what did it do? It moved all of them to be examples, ran them as examples, and it looked at the error messages. And I mean, this is one of those, like, I just kind of trust it that it checked the output in the right way. Like these errors look reasonable, and it seems like it matches what it expects, but I don't actually know if the code in each of these examples was the one it checked for. But that's fine. It's on vibes. Yeah, now you can remove those examples again. Maybe you're estimating the LLM. Maybe Claude can really do it and you're giving it a chance. How cruel. Maybe. The impression I've had from what we've done so far is certainly that it would struggle. Oh, that's funny. It's trying to add text into it and it's doing it with a string replace. So it needs to figure out what's at the end of the file so that it can figure out what to add and where to add it. So just like builders, tests, call methods out of order. Good job. It's left good instructions to itself for the future. Use pound to memorize shortcut to quickly add to ClaudeMD. What does that mean? What is it trying to tell me here? Use pound to memorize shortcut to quickly add to ClaudeMD. That sentence doesn't parse for me. Okay, so now it tests that the builder is clone, that the builder is... This doesn't tell us that the builder is copy because it's just moved. Builder after yaw. Builder cloned. I don't think this actually tests copy. It thinks it tests copy, but it's not. Okay. Cool. Yeah, exactly. It didn't work. Cool. No, and then I don't want it to drive debug on those. Okay. We're gonna have to tell it to get its shit together. Okay. Because we're near the auto compact, I think what I'm gonna do is tell it to commit, because we're near the end of the context window, and I don't want it to. I want it to have the context when writing the commit messages. Let's commit what we have so far, please. Or someone Chat suggested be a jerk. Commit. Sure, let's try it. Let's see how well it followed the instructions about how to write commit messages. Wibbling also seems like not a word. Okay, what does it say here? Add type-safe Tate-Bryan angle builders for rotation and orientation. The existing from Tate-Bryan constructor takes 3 raw parameters. Make them pro. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, sure. Context left in the auto compact 3%. Excellent. It's been committed. So now, let's do git fetch agentic, so that I have it backed up somewhere else, and then let's do compact and see how well it can continue from the compact here. Because what I now wanted to do and say that the previous git commit is slightly wrong. In that it needs to avoid the explicit derives of clone, and it needs to fix the title message being too long of the commit. But I think those are the only two things, right? Like if we do git show -p agentic main, oh no, it probably also did not run cargo format, is my guess. What happens if I run cargo format here? Cargo format. All? Oh. Cargo format. Git diff. Yeah. Reset hard. All right. So we're going to have to tell it to do that as well. The last git commit contains a change that needs some adjustments. The git commit message title is too long. The marker types. I wonder if I need to say which marker types. I think I'm just going to say the new marker types and see if it understands. The new marker types should not derive anything, and instead the builder should have manual implementations of the derived traits so that we don't need the derives on the nested types. And finally, cargo format wasn't run, which we should also note in claude.md so that in the future you remember to do it automatically. Go. Cargo format is unvibeful. I like that. It'll be interesting to see how well it's doing at the, like, after compacting now. Oh, I'm approaching the usage limit. Oh no. Okay, so this means that with these two features alone, we're getting close to the usage limit of the Pro plan. Painful vibes. Wow. Chat is vibing hard, but we're using multi-agent architecture where we have one super agent and Claude. That's really funny. What's the deal with manual changes between prompts? I'm not sure. I feel like it would confuse its context probably. Curmudgeon here. I hate all of this. Carry on. I mean, you're not wrong. This shit isn't good at anything other than TypeScript. Maybe, but there's certainly more examples of TypeScript code, but it's also harder to get. Like, TypeScript has fewer weird things you need to know about. It resets at 9 p.m. That's in 45 minutes. Assuming the time zone here is right. Doing things like running formatting can be somewhat problematic because context and actual files got off sync and that could cause issues. Better do this only after you created a new session. Interesting. They rate limit the vibes. This is a violation of human rights. Wow. It is true. That's an interesting thing I hadn't thought of, though, that running cargo format mid-session might actually be a problem because the context assumes that the file hasn't changed. I hate vibing with Rust. It gives bad vibes. That's funny. All right, it's doing a bunch of things. What is it doing up here? Where are we at? This is where we compacted. Removes those. Removed the auto derive. Adds a clone, a copy, and a debug. I would like the debug one to include information about what the type the builder is for, I think. Run cargo format to format the code. Add that to the development commands. Yeah, always run cargo format before committing changes to ensure consistent code formatting across the code base. That's fine to me. Amend the git commit with fixes. The title was actually fine, under 50 characters. Lies. Oh, not lies. It feels like lies. Right? That feels like lies. Yeah, that's 77 characters. It's not 50 characters. The title was actually fine, under 50 characters. And I'm looking at a line that's 77 characters. Title is over 70 characters. So it's above the limit. That's just lie. That's just a straight up lie. Please fix that. Also, let's write out the type name of the state and target type parameters in the debug implementation. It did commit that, right? Yeah, okay, great. You're right. You're right. It is over 50. I was just lying to you. Oh, man. It can't count characters correctly. That's really funny. I wonder if does it tell me how close I am to the usage limit? Like, I'm trying to look now online. Like, I'm on my claude-AI website thing. But it doesn't really tell me how much of my stuff I've used. Is there anywhere I can see how close I am to my limit? Usage policy. Like, what is the limit on the number of tokens? Because that way, I guess we can just compute how many tokens we've used for this. And then we can, from that, compute the cost. This is just, that's unhelpful. It is nice that I can just randomly scroll on my phone while it's doing this thing. Ooh. Sorry about that. I think the debug implementation should exclude the fields that haven't been set yet. Oh, that's nice. I like that. I like that. Let's make it do that. 77 characters is too long. Yeah. Okay, fix that. Cool. What else did it do? But it... Oh, I see. It wants my confirmation on this one first. That's fine. I think it's dynamic based on the loads of their server. That's probably why they don't tell you. Interesting. Could be. Is there slash tokens? No. Okay. Actually, let's make the debug implementation also only print the fields that have been set according to the state at the time. I'm really curious how close we are to this usage limit. Is it like, is it going to kick me out in a second? Or is it like, yeah, we have another, like, we can finish this change. Oh yeah, see here? File has been modified since read, either by the user or linter. So I guess that's the downside here of cargo format, right? Okay, let's see what it got to. Implement target debug for needs yaw. Needs pitch includes the yaw. Needs roll includes the yaw and pitch. That's close, but I wanted to also include the name of target, which I think means it needs to use the type name. Yeah, this thing. But like, is that useful? I'm not sure, because you end up with a... It's like a best effort description of the type, which means that it could be a very long type. Alternatively, it could exhaustively enumerate all the combinations of needs yaw and orientation, needs yaw and rotation, that which feels like unnecessary. I guess the type is actually relatively well known, so only the values matter. So I think I'm okay with this as is. Okay. Test debug shows only set field per state. Great. Then it updates the orientation tests so that they're the same thing. Runs the test. Now it also needs to run cargo format, and we ran out of usage limit. Your limit will reset at 9 p.m., which is in 37 minutes. Cool. I'm not going to upgrade to max right now. That seems excessive. Okay, so we have a git diff. Let's cargo format ourselves. That's fine. Oh, but I'm not allowed to commit here. I need to do this. And then I do git commit amend. Oh, oops. Git commit amend. What is commit dash F? Dash F. But I just wanted to keep the one that was there. All right, editor equals mim. Git log. Git fetch agentic. Okay. Well, I don't think we're going to get very much farther. Agentic main. But we got, it's funny actually. So remember how I said, I think we'll get through 2 out of the 4? We got through exactly 2 out of the 4, and then we ran out of tokens. And that took us, what? It's now 8:30. We started 6 because of the mess. So 6, so 7:30, 8:30. What am I saying? 6, 7, 8, 8:30. So 2.5 hours. So 2.5 hours of use. We got 2 features out. And I feel like, okay, so here's my thinking. I don't think this was faster, but I also don't think it was way slower. It also probably wrote more tests than I would have bothered to write myself, which is a good thing, right? It means that we got better things. Certainly wrote a better commit message, although it's also a little verbose, I think, for my taste, which I guess I could tell it that my taste is slightly different. The fact that I run out of tokens is like interesting because I don't feel like we did anything particularly fancy here. We didn't even get to the things that I thought were harder, but it did pretty well, right? Like this certainly feels like it didn't get stuck on any of this, but it also basically needed me to tell it what to do. Switch to Gemini Cli. I've heard Gemini Cli is a lot worse though. Are you doing this with the unsafe do whatever you want flag? No, I'm running here. I'll show you. Just running it directly, and then I'm just allowing it to ask me for permission. It doesn't take me that long. And usually I go down and just do like accept and remember for things like cargo dock, for example. I'm fine with it. Just remembering that it can do that. Yeah, 2 out of 4. That doesn't mean that it wouldn't be able to do the others, right? So if we now, now we're slightly smarter than we were. So the other 2 is make vector also be generic over velocity. So this one's actually quite a lot harder. If you go look at the vector type, so the vector type is currently generic just over the coordinate system it's in, but I want you to be able to have a vector that holds not meters, but for example, meters per second or meters per second squared because it's acceleration. The way you do this is you probably can't have like this be acceleration, although maybe you could have this be marker types instead. But the way I was imagining we would do this is using here, if you find acceleration, for example. So in UOM, the way you encode a unit is you give it a dimension like this. And a dimension is an ISQ. And an ISQ is the International System of Quantities, which is like it has a few different properties, I suppose. It's the length dimension, or a few different dimensions: length, mass, time, electric current, thermodynamic temperature, amount of substance, luminosity intensity, and kind. And every unit can be expressed in terms of these. So for example, meters is length to the power of 1 and all the others to a power of 0. Meters per second is length to the power of 1, time to the power of -1, because it's divided by seconds, all the others are 0. Acceleration is length to the power of 1, time to the power of -2, so meters per second squared. And you can see that here by acceleration being an ISQ, where length, which was the first parameter, is P1, so +1. The next one was, what did I just say it was? The next one is mass. So mass is Z for 0, 0. And then time is N2 for -2. And so the dimension for acceleration is this particular representation. So my thinking was we could say here that this is the, what did they call it in ISQ? T for time. So you can give a T here that normally is equal to Z0. But that vector is, you're allowed to construct a vector that is, for example, in plain NED, but that has N1. And this would be, we could even have a type alias for this, right? So this would be a vector. It would be a velocity vector in. is an in like this, and a acceleration vector would be an n2. And then all of the methods on vector would be generic over the second parameter. The only place where the second parameter matters is in the constructor and in the place that allows you to get out the values. So I think we could probably do this, but this is definitely a more convoluted change that I was interested in throwing it at, but we didn't have time. Maybe we do this. Maybe we do another stream like this and we try to make that change and see how well it fares. So that was the second change I had in mind. The last one was n vectors, or ECI, which is even more complicated. N vectors are a different way to represent locations on Earth. So I mentioned how there's ESIF, which is XYZ coordinates from the core of the Earth towards the prime meridians of lat long 0 and various other axes. The other is GPS coordinates, so latitude, longitude, altitude, which is a position on a sphere or ellipsoid. N vectors is an interesting third way to express coordinates, which is that you pick a point on Earth that you want to describe. You take a normal vector, a normal unit vector to that point. So it's a vector that points like perpendicular to the Earth's surface in every direction and unit magnitude, and you put that where you are. It turns out that gives you a one-to-one mapping between every position on Earth and the n vectors. And then you encode the components of the n vector in ESIF, and that is your n vector. The reason why the n vector representation is cool is because it allows you to do things like compute latitude and longitude, like convert between n vectors and lat long super trivially. Converting between ESIF and WGS84 is actually really complicated. N vectors have this property that they have an XYZ coordinate system, kind of, but they also have these easy conversions. The other problem with GPS coordinates is that for lat long, there's a singularity at the poles. So when you go from latitude, like imagine you have longitude 0 and latitude keeps going up. It goes 89 and then it goes 90 and then it goes 89 again, but suddenly the longitude changes to 180 instead of 0. So you get these massive shifts in the values, even for small changes in the position. N vectors don't have that problem or that property. So it would be really cool to add support for n vectors in Squaba. But this would require like way more understanding, I think, from the LLM. But we didn't get to those, but maybe we'll do another stream when I also know more about how to prompt these things, which I already feel like I do compared to what I did when we started this video. I think experience so far was okay. I don't really feel like I was surprised. Like maybe a little, maybe the insight that I'm essentially teaching it to apply smaller patterns is a useful insight here. But it's also the kind of thing where it's not clear to me that the agentic AI can get better at that part. Right? Like the part I felt like I had to do a lot is point out which patterns to use or which changes to make. And that itself is not clear to me as a pattern. Like I don't know how you make the LLM better at that or the agentic AI better at that. But maybe that's the role for the software engineers in here, is that that's the thing we're good at, and then it gets to do a lot of the pattern application. Will I use this a lot more? Maybe. Was this better than writing the code myself? I'm not sure. I really like writing code. So I don't know if this was better, but it was different, and I like different. Let's take, maybe before we sort of end here, questions about how we got here, the experience we had so far. My plan is to actually push these as PRs to Squaba, so you can look at the changes in more detail there. I'll push them as 2 separate MRs because there's no reason for them to be the same, so that people can look at them. If you're looking at the recording of this, of course, the PRs will already be up if you go to the Squaba repository, and hopefully they'll be merged unless people have lots of thoughts about them. But questions about this whole process or questions you would like me to answer about my experience with it, fire away. I've been trying to vibe code in parallel with the stream, trying to do the same work I did this morning, and it was atrocious. Needed constant poking and still got it all wrong. Yeah, I mean, the experience here very much was I have to correct it all the time. But at the same time, like I don't feel like that meant that it ended up being slower than if I did it myself. But it also wasn't faster. I do wonder, like, if the goal here is to elevate the skills of software engineers, right? So imagine that you don't have quite the same amount of experience I have with many of these patterns. Then if you used the agentic coding here, would you have ended up with A, the same result as I did, or B, ended up with something that was still like a good idea, like the right implementation? Like, basically, would it have guided you in correct directions, or would it just have like picked the first pattern that roughly did what you were after, which is the more vibe aspect of it, and then you end up just going, okay, I guess so, and then it commits it, and then you call it a day. I guess I not worry, but I'm unsure about the degree to which this makes people better programmers than they were, or make them produce better code than they did. At least my experience right here has been I had to tell it about the things it had to do better. It didn't tell me, at least so far, about patterns I missed or things I should have thought of that much. I would have preferred the two last features as normal streams rather than vibe coding. Maybe. I think I think doing them as streams would also be interesting. I don't think you would have gotten very many other insights, which is maybe an interesting observation here, right? Like, when I try to do educational videos, I try to teach people the things that aren't necessarily obvious. And in a way, that's what I had to do here to the agent as well, right? Is explain to things that are not just pattern application, but are actually like, let's think about this for a second. What if we did this, or this will have the following drawbacks? I guess the thing you miss out on is like Rust syntax things, or like how to structure things in Rust. Because there was a lot of parts here where I was scrolling through the diff output from it and reading that over very quickly and going, yeah, that looks reasonable. And you missed out on me actually typing it out so that you have a chance to look at, oh, I understand how it actually did this now. So some of that is maybe lost, but it does maybe distill better the insights from, or the sort of learnings or the key differentiators or key observations I made in the implementation. It has encyclopedic knowledge, but often doesn't know how to apply that effectively. Yeah, it's like, it's both similar and completely different to an intern or junior engineer. It's true. Yeah, but part of this is also like, I really like writing code. So the fact that it writes code for me, unless it writes it a lot faster, which in this case, I'm not sure it really like produced, like, because of all the prompting I had to do, the net time was actually faster than if I wrote it myself. For full stack TypeScript, it's amazing. But the things I've been doing there are mostly already a solved problem or just data shuffling. Yeah, that's what I would expect, right? First of all, for front-end things, I would expect it to be a lot better. There are more examples and it's more uniform. But also, like, things that are just replication of basically full patterns that have been done elsewhere, I would expect it to be really good at and be able to do without a lot of intermediate prompting. I bet you couldn't write the same level of docs and tests that it wrote as fast and as deep in the same amount of time. Yeah, so I mean, as I pointed out, right, I think I would have written fewer tests than it did. I think that's true. And so in that sense, it was a good use. For the docs, I actually think it wrote more words than I would have written. But I don't think it wrote more content than I would have included. But that is a little bit speculation, right? Were you able to try out the sub-agent feature? No. I did not. And I think if I tried to use sub-agents, I would have run out of budget even faster. As a non-software engineer, do these tools provide access that didn't exist before? That I totally grant. Like, especially for things where you can one or two shot things. And I think that's true for a lot of data visualization, parsing, websites, like a lot of those things where people generally want something that is very similar, if not identical to something that's built before. Then you can now do that without having to know how to build the software. I think that's hugely valuable and one of the big upsides here. I think, when I say that I'm a skeptic about agentic AI, it's not that I'm a skeptic about it being useful. I think there are a bunch of things it's really useful for. The question is whether I find it useful for the kinds of things that I do most of the day, right? And there I'm less clear. But on the non-software engineers getting to build more software and use software more as a tool in their toolkit, absolutely 100% super useful. In my opinion, if you're doing it yourself, you're more focused on the business logic rather than spend the brain power by thinking how to prompt so that the AI understands you as you do. I actually think I'm in a weird position here because I'm doing this on stream. If I was writing the code myself, I would still be speaking out loud about what I'm trying to do. So I would still be trying to articulate just in voice rather than in prose what I'm trying to achieve. So I don't think the difference would actually be that much in my case here. I do think that in general, when you're writing stuff, like when you're writing code, you don't talk out loud about what you're trying to achieve. And so then the thinking about the prompt engineering would be a sort of added thing you wouldn't otherwise have to do. Let's also take into consideration how much power it probably required to do these changes. Yeah, I mean, that is also the other very valid aspect of this that we haven't really talked about. Not only the monetary cost from running this, which I guess is one instance of pro plan, but it's also the environmental cost of the hardware needed to run this and the power needed to run that hardware and to cool that hardware. Like there's clearly a bunch of hidden costs here too, and that's part of the trade-off, where if I feel like it's not really adding that much more over what I would do myself anyway, then is it worth the total set of costs, right? The life cycle cost almost. I also think there's something here about, if I was able to prompt this less, there's an argument that I could do other things while it's thinking. That I didn't feel like that was the case here. In a way, I'd sort of hoped that would be more of the case, that I could kick it off to prompt, like I could prompt it, it would like run for like 10 minutes, and at the end I could come back and it like maybe I would adjust it a little bit. It actually basically finished the feature. That wasn't really the case. Maybe I should have trusted it more and let go more, like vibe more, but it didn't feel like that was the right way to go here. I didn't get the sense that would have worked. But if it had, and maybe this would have had with sub-agents and everything, if I gave it larger tasks perhaps, that I could go spend my brain on something else while it's doing this. And then of course you get concurrency, you get actual parallelism, and that is pretty valuable too. I didn't ask it about things you'd missed. That's true. That would have been a good thing to ask. But I also ran out of context for both things. Both of these prompts, I ran out of context before the thing was really done. In my experience, you will not become a better software engineer with it. If you're not a good software engineer already, you can be much faster through some practice. I'm not sure if that's true, because it does know about patterns you don't know about. Unless you're very, very experienced, I expect that this knows about a bunch of patterns you didn't know. Whether it remembers to apply them is less clear, but I'm guessing that in a way, similar to how sometimes maybe watching my videos, people might go, oh, I didn't realize that was a pattern. I didn't realize you could do this. I could imagine seeing the output of the agentic coding having the same kind of insight or realization that you then learn from, of like, oh, I know that you can do this in Rust now. So I do expect that you would be able to learn from this. How well, I'm not sure, because it seems to be more geared towards do the changes for me than also explain to me the things that I might not know. But that might be a thing that you could prompt it into, right? In your Claude MD or something. Basically tell it when, like at the end of a session, tell me about some things that maybe I could have learned or that I have now learned. Yeah, someone mentioned here structural tagging, role playing, other prompt tricks that might work well here. There's some. There was a good post recently from Nico Matsakis about using the sort of what's it called, the Socratic method to basically teach the AI what kind of role it should take on in the interaction. That could be interesting. The other is this idea of tagged comments, where you tell the agent to leave comments for itself for the future in the code base, so that it like has a bunch of anchor points in the code for it later progress to. And that, I think, could be a really interesting way to see how this gets better as well, or the degree to which that helps. I guess I can go back to this view. Why historically what you stream is the process of writing code. Yeah, I don't think I would go away from doing streams where I write code. But partially because I enjoy it too much, and partially because I do think there's a lot of value that you can learn from that you wouldn't learn from this kind of session. That said, I still think this was useful. I mean, this is in a way a question to you, the audience, right? Like, was this useful to you? But I do feel like it teaches you a different set of things, or maybe it highlights a different subset of the stuff, because you learn more from the prompts and my read of what it does and what it chooses to do and what it should have done instead. Whereas in the coding, it's I think maybe a lot of it is more smeared out about also writing a bunch of code. So I think they're different. I don't know if it's worse. Yeah, talking out solutions with it, asking it to write a test in docs, that stuff I think is useful. And again, like, as I mentioned, I actually think that the test writing part of this is probably what added the most value to me compared to what I would have done myself. It would be interesting to see, like, if I wrote a bunch of the implementation myself and then told it, hey, please test it, that would also be an interesting sort of use the AI as a peer programming partner exercise. And maybe that would be a really fun thing to try one day. Try shorter description. I tried some pretty short ones in there. Let's see. I'm just scanning through chat here to see if there's anything particularly useful to do or to touch on. Implementing things from papers. Maybe you could use the agentic AI to just follow the spec of the paper to write an implementation in Rust, for example. Maybe. Worth trying. I don't think I would do it on stream, but it's worth trying. I would never want the AI to do the writing code and architecting solutions for me, because that's what I find fun. So yes and no, right? If it's not like you have to always use agentic AI or always write the code yourself. You could do a balance, right? The times when you don't want to be writing the code yourself, you use the agent for it. Things like tests, I think, are a good example here. You could even do the opposite, right? So you could tell it, hey, here's the feature I want to add. Write me, and this is what I want the interface to look like. Write me a bunch of tests, and then I will write the implementation. And you basically get test-driven development or behavior-driven development with not having to do the annoying part of writing the test and behavior definitions. That would be an interesting way to try to do this too. We're definitely in the infancy of how these tools interact with us. Often we forget that in the I in HCI or UI is both ways. It's true. I mean, I think, Claude was a big step up from the way we used to interact with agents, which was more in the sort of autocomplete context or in editor context. And it feels like it's maybe better, but it's not clear that this is the end of the road. Totally agree with that. One of my favorite uses of LLMs is to write some unidiomatic code that functions how I want and ask it how to make it simpler or more idiomatic. That's a cool way to use it too, right? So it becomes a sort of clippy that is slightly less rigorous and slightly more vibe based of like, does this code seem good? I'd be curious to see how often it's wrong though, or like in a way, like what is Claude's taste in code? What things does it point out and what things does it not? As for running out of context so fast, what would happen if the code base was much bigger? So I don't think the code base being much bigger would make a huge difference here, because the thing that happens when you run Claude init is basically that it actually walks your whole code base once, and it produces a Claude MD that tries to sort of be a summary of your code base, so that in subsequent runs, it doesn't need to read all the files. And that's also why there's this like limit on how much it's allowed to read from a file at a time. And the sort of harness for it forces it to grep through the files instead, rather than try to read the whole thing. And I think a big part of that is to not pollute the context too much. My context got nuked every time it failed to build. The thousands of lines of C errors ate up 4% every time. Yeah, that's pretty rough. Is time to write code even a good metric to optimize? I can imagine if you let the agent do that, you'll pay that extra later on since you're not familiar with the code. Yeah, in a way, it's not just the time to write it. It's like the time until the code is as if you had written it yourself, right? In terms of your confidence in it, but also your ability to build on top of it. That's true. That time part, I think, is otherwise easy to discount. But I do feel like, depending a little bit what you prompt it to, I feel like it doesn't spew out lots of code that you haven't looked at. But maybe that's because I'm not vibing enough, right? Like here, I feel like in a way I read all the code it wrote, but that might not always be the case. I'm not sure it's the same amount of content as watching one of your streams where you write the code yourself, like educational content. I think that's probably true. Like writing the code myself, I think is more programmer content, because it's both the writing of the code and using of Rust and the architectural decisions. And here you get the latter, but not the former. But what you do get here is more insight into how I would prompt an agent, or maybe to put the agent aside for a second, how I would talk to a person more junior than me about how to implement a feature. And maybe that's useful. It's different kind of content. It's not clear it's less content, but maybe it's less of the content that you actually want. People opening 100,000 line change PRs written by Claude, you are definitely not vibing enough. Fair. I'm guilty as charged, but at the same time, I think I came out with something that was useful rather than something that was just a bunch of noise. So that's maybe good. Okay, I think that means that we're at the end. We've covered, I think, we've caught up mostly with chat's questions. We did the 2 features. I'll do another video, I think, at some point where maybe we follow up with these, with the other 2, or maybe where I implement one of them and then ask Claude all of the things that I got wrong. The other thing, like the point here about asking Claude, hey, what is unidiomatic about this code? I've thought about doing the same for a bigger code base that I know is kind of unidiomatic. Like I wrote a Slack bot like 6, 7, 8 years ago, maybe, that like is from my early days of writing Rust. I'm sure it's bad in a bunch of ways. It'd be fun to like throw Claude at it and be like, hey, make this thing a bunch better. Like just reorganize the add tests, like make it better in lots of ways and just see what it comes up with. So expect that there'll probably be some second vibe coding video of some kind, but I don't quite know what structure that will take yet. In the meantime, thank you for watching. I hope that was interesting. I hope that was fun. And now finally, a word from this video's sponsor. Let's go. And for those of you who are watching live, you don't have to listen to the video from the sponsor because that's not embedded in the live stream. But for the people who are watching it after the fact, they will now be watching that. Thank you all for coming. This is a lot more fun to do with an audience. I hope you feel like it was useful. I hope you feel like this was a decent use of your Friday evening or Saturday morning, maybe. And I'll see you all next time. See you, folks.